You know, my friends, some things in life are incredibly overdue, and one of them is me talking about a Halo 3 anniversary again. Now, I've not made a Halo 3 anniversary video in well over 7 years now. In fact, the last time I made a video about H3A, Halo 3 wasn't even 10 years old yet, so how about that for the passage of time, eh? But there's a reason I'm talking about it again, right? And I'm not just talking about it for the sake of it. There's actually the slightest chance now of Halo 3 Anniversary actually becoming a thing, at least far more of a chance than there ever was before. So to catch you up, when the Combat Evolved remake leaked a few months ago, there were also some simultaneous rumors / leaks about the remake extending to the entire original trilogy. Now, of course, do take this with a grain of salt, as is the case with all leaks and rumors that I talk about, but this idea does make sense. If you take a look at all the other series that got major remakes recently, Resident Evil started at least the modern remakes with Resident Evil 2, and then did 3, 4, and now there are rumours of 5 and 0 getting remade. Call of Duty started with COD 4, and then did a Modern Warfare 2 campaign remake. Dead Space started with Dead Space 1, and had plans for a Dead Space 2 remake as well, but sadly they were cancelled. The Persona games had remakes beyond 3 planned because of 3's success, and so on. If the Halo 1 remake is good, and if it's successful, which are two galactic-sized ifs right now, but if those two things come to pass, then I see no reason why the Halo remakes wouldn't continue beyond Halo 1, just like what happened with, say, Resident Evil, for example. But the big question is how Halo 3 Anniversary would be handled. Now, the Halo 3 Anniversary that we're talking about today, and that we'll likely be talking about for the foreseeable future, is radically different to the Halo 3 Anniversary that we were talking about for, 7+ years prior to this. So, historically, we've always kind of associated the Halo 3 Anniversary with being a kind of Halo 1 Anniversary and Halo 2 Anniversary style remaster, where it's the exact same game, just with updated graphics, sound effects, and soundtrack. But now we're looking at Halo 3 Anniversary through the lens of a remake, which, as we've previously established when talking about the Halo 1 remake, has significantly more potential and also risk to it. The risk-reward of doing a remake is drastically higher than a remaster. Now, again, I'm going to remind you that right now, all of this is both theoretical and entirely hypothetical. However, as with Halo Combat Evolved, like I've said before, on paper, there is a ton of potential with a Halo 3 Anniversary remake. And to look at its potential, we first need to diagnose what Halo 3 did wrong. Now, don't get me wrong, Halo 3 is a god-tier video game, hands down, the very minimum a 9.5 out of 10 for me. But it's that missing 0.5 that I think a remake should target. So, the main detractions, complaints, and criticisms that I see about Halo 3's campaign are that the Earth section lasts too long and is basically semi-filler story-wise, that the Arbiter's presence is massively lacking compared to Halo 2, that the level Cortana sucks, that Miranda says her iconic,
"Ma'am, squad leaders are requesting a rally point. Where should they go?"
To war.
Oh, right.
And to be quite honest, they're about the only complaints that I really see about Halo 3's campaign. And thankfully, these are all things that for the most part would be very easy to fix and improve on in a remake. It'd be very easy to add more Arbiter dialogue and subplots to the story. For example, he completely vanishes from midway through Crow's Nest until midway through the Storm. There's a ton of stuff you could do with this story there. Extra cutscenes, some even terminals or side missions, for example. He's also never the focus of any cutscene either. He's present sometimes, but Chief is always the focus of pretty much every cutscene in Halo 3. Adding new cutscenes, potentially even in cut levels, which don't worry, we're going to get to, would be a great way to organically give Arbiter more presence in Halo 3's story. Cortana as a level was very, very slapped together and ended up being a far cry from what the level was supposed to be originally, and hell, even Bungie themselves don't like the level. But Bungie's original Cortana would have been so good that had it come to pass, I guarantee it would have gone down as one of the series' best levels ever. It had a Flood Arbiter boss fight, it had a partly drivable Scarab, and it had a Gravemind boss fight that gave him a definitive death and end as a character. So, restore Cortana to its former glory. Miranda's infamously iconic
To war.
is very corny, granted, but I think just honestly leave it there. At this point, it's kind of just a funny, albeit very odd 5 seconds of Halo 3. I mean, I actually think it gives the movie a little bit of that kind of like 80s action movie corny charm. But if they really wanted to address this line that, like, I don't know, all of 10 people like to insist completely ruins Halo 3's story, then it would be very easy to just either omit it entirely or rewrite it to be slightly less corny. But if you ask me, as time's passed, I think that this line has both ironically and unironically aged like fine wine, and I think it's one of those things like, yeah, it's not a well-written line at all, but it's kind of funny, it's a little bit quirky, gives the game a bit of charm. I'd say just leave it.
To war.
And speaking of time, today's sponsor delivers the passage of time and more in style. Holzkern, a family-owned business based out of Vienna. So you may have noticed this beautiful timepiece on my wrist so far in this video, or this bad boy in a load of my pictures recently. These are some of Holzkern's watches, and I genuinely love them, but they're not just a watch brand, they're also a watch and jewelry brand as well, for both men and women. All their products are made out of natural materials, thus making each one unique, and all their wood is FSC certified as well, so they're actively engaged against deforestation. As I said, I genuinely love my Holzkern watches. This new one that I've got, this bad boy, is the Haiku in olive colouring. The last one that I got, the Melodical, was a much more conventional watch, so I decided to go for the Haiku this time because of how unconventional it is. The links and much of the face are partly composed of natural wood, and the exposed mechanism in the back of the face legit just looks so cool. I love watching the little dials move around in the background, almost as much as I love these watches. All Holzkern products are made in rather small batches, so they tend to sell out pretty quickly. They also offer free express worldwide shipping from beautiful Vienna, with custom fees on them. Products typically arrive within 2 to 5 business days. So if, like me, you love both the design and also the motivation behind Holzkern's watches and jewelry, make sure to hit my link in the description or the pinned comment and use code HiddenXP for 10% off your purchase store-wide. Now, let's move on to talk about the only complaints, and I do use the term complaints rather loosely, that I think would be a lot harder to fix. And that is the fact that the Earth section of the game is quite story light. So over half of Halo 3's story takes place on Earth. That's 5 out of the 9 total levels. And despite that, only 3 major story beats really occurred during the Earth arc. Chief gets rescued, the Ark itself is uncovered, and the Flood come to Earth. Now this makes it seem like the Earth section of Halo 3 is almost entirely pointless, that it's mostly filler, as some people say, and although I kind of do agree that in a story sense, it's partly filler, story isn't the only important element of a game's campaign. There's also obviously the gameplay as well, and personally, I think it's undeniable that the Earth sections of Halo 3's campaign are extremely fun to play. Sierra 117 is an excellent kind of taking the reins level. Crow's Nest taking place in an abandoned World War II bunker is such a cool quirk. Salvo Highway is an excellent vehicle level. The Storm Scarab fight is amazing, etc, etc. So I don't think outright cutting a load of these levels is really the way to go. Don't get me wrong, the Earth section is definitely very light on story, but I don't think that is the main problem with it. Rather, I think the main problem is how much of the overall campaign this story light section takes up. It could be because of how much Halo 2 I played, but back in the day, and even to a degree now, I'm kind of accustomed to longer Halo campaigns, and I always thought that Halo 3's campaign was a little bit short, but as you'll know if you watched any of my recent videos, that wasn't always the case. I also always thought that in the second half of Halo 3's campaign, it kind of felt like there were big gaps between the levels, which, upon later research, I realised there was a reason for. And would you believe it, there's a blanket fix and common denominator between all of these things: cut content. Now, you're probably sick of hearing me talk about it now, but cut content is something that I have been talking about a lot on the channel recently, partly because of just how genuinely interested I am in video game cut content, but also because cut content stands as some of the greatest potential when it comes to remaking a game. This might sound a little bit weird here, but just stick with me. The name remake for games, I think a lot of the time is quite an oxymoron, because I think the last thing that a remake should aim to do for a beloved game that isn't completely broken at least, is remake the entire experience from scratch. Rather, I think that remakes should seek to realize the developer's original intentions with a game that they weren't able to execute on thanks to various limitations of the time the original game was made in. Remakes should act as a second go at a game without any of those previous limitations in place. They should aim to create a definitive edition of said game that doesn't try and fix and change what isn't broken. What was the golden rule from the last remake video? Additive and expansive, not alterative. So, back to my original point. Adding in some of Halo 3's cut levels, more specifically the ones that were cut from the second half of the game, would fill that second half out a ton more, and it would stop the story light Earth section from making up the bulk of the campaign. But we'd also be killing two birds with one stone here as well, because not only would it improve the flow and the kind of construct of the story, but we'd also be getting some brand new and amazing Halo 3 levels. The main attraction when it comes to restoring cut Halo 3 content would, of course, be Guardian Forest, which is hands down the most iconic cut Halo level of all time. Home to the original Guardian Sentinel, the Guardian Forest aesthetic, and so much more cool stuff. The restoration of this level alone would make Halo 3 Anniversary worth it in my books. The other one is Foreigner City. Now, the main reason that Bungie cut Foreigner City as a level was because they thought that it revealed too much about the mystery of the Foreigners, and at the time, that was absolutely the case, and it's why, as much as it hurts, I am kinda happy they cut it. But nowadays, for better or worse, depending on which kind of view you take on it, the mystery of the Foreigners has been largely destroyed / unveiled. They really aren't that mysterious anymore. At least they're nowhere near as mysterious as they were during the Halo 3 days, right? So at this point, I kind of see no reason not to include this level. Okay, well, I say no reason, that's not entirely true. So there is a problem when it comes to restoring Guardian Forest and Foreigner City. And that problem is that it would break the golden, additive and expansive, not alterative rule. So when those levels were cut from the campaign, the holes that they left in the overall campaign structure, of course, had to get patched up. So, for example, Guardian Forest being cut was patched up with the cutscene of Chief getting on the Pelican at the end of the arc, and Foreigner City being cut was patched up with the last chapter of the Covenant, which is arguably the best section of Halo 3's entire campaign, the section from the tank run all the way up to the Citadel rush. So, if you wanted to add these very iconic levels, unless you veered massively from Bungie's original intentions for them, which I wouldn't want personally, you would have to change some of Halo 3's existing campaign structure, which, man, it's a tough one, isn't it? Like, on the one hand, I really want those levels realized, but also, I don't want Halo 3's near perfect flow, near perfect, to be damaged. It's a very tough one. Let me know in the comments what you want them to do, if you'd want them to alter the campaign structure to add those levels, or not add them for the sake of keeping the flow and the structure the same. Honestly, personally, I'm torn. I can see positives and negatives of both of them, and I kind of want both of them, to be honest with you. I want a very, very, very faithful Halo 3 recreation, but I also want Guardian Forest and Foreigner City. It's a tough one. I think the only example of this that people would, for the most part, be happy with would be recreating Cortana in line with Bungie's original vision for the level. I personally don't hate Cortana as much as most people do, but Bungie's original idea for the level was objectively better in like every single way than what we ended up getting. I think you'd be very hard pressed to find somebody that would rather them keep the current Cortana over us getting Cortana with a partly drivable Scarab and a Gravemind boss fight. I feel like you gotta be kind of insane to want old Cortana over that Cortana, to be quite honest with you. So, moving on to the cut enemies, weapons and vehicles that they could add to the remake, honestly, there isn't really much to talk about here, because I didn't realise this until making this video actually, but in terms of sandbox related stuff, Halo 3 really doesn't have that much that was cut. In terms of enemies, the only unique enemies that I think are worth restoring would be the Flood Infector, which was the big tripedal anti-vehicle flood form that was meant to infect vehicles at range. The Flood stealth form, which we know nothing about, but it looks really, really cool. The Flood transport form, which was a scorpion-sized Flood form that consumed enemies and then spat them out as combat forms. And the Sentinel Enforcer, which is my favorite Sentinel design of all time, and one that I think was sorely missing in Halo 3. Oh, and also, if they do remake Cortana, bring the Flood Arbiters back as well, because they'd be really cool. As for vehicles, I don't even know, maybe add the Falcon, but I feel like that'd invalidate the Hornet, and personally, I love the way that the Hornet plays into Halo 3, so I don't even know if I'd want them to do that. The only weapon that I'd like to see restored would be the Guardian Eye that you could pick up. So on Guardian Forest, once you took out the Guardian Sentinel, the idea was that you'd be able to rip out the Guardian's Eye and use it as like a portable laser beam, which would be really cool. But if they didn't remake Guardian Forest, I don't really know where they'd fit that into the campaign. It's kind of hinging on Guardian Forest and by extension, the Guardian Sentinel being brought back as well. The only thing that I'd really like to see them restore is the Vortex equipment, which was cut, but the Digside team recently found it. It has a similar kind of operating style to the Power Drain and the Flare, except it sucks objects into it, almost like a reverse version of the Pulse Flare from Ruby's Halo 3 mod, and also like the Dark Matter Cube from Turok Evolution. Future Hiddenxperia, roll the video.
Roger, roger.
Okay, we've talked a lot about what needs to be added and restored. Now I want to briefly talk about some things that I think should be kept the exact same in Halo 3 Anniversary. Firstly, the gameplay. In my eyes, not a single thing needs to be added or changed about Halo 3's core gameplay. Nothing like sprint or slide or clamber or anything like that should go anywhere near Halo 3 in my eyes, nor should any other quote-unquote modern movement mechanics. If they added that stuff, the list of core gameplay elements that would also have to change as a knock-on effect is almost endless, and they'd change Halo 3 in so many fundamental ways that it wouldn't feel like Halo 3 anymore. Secondly, the soundtrack. Now, when it comes to talking about the Halo 1 anniversary, people make the argument that the Halo 1 soundtrack was not only rather short, but it was also recorded, like, at this point, 23, 24 years ago, so it sounds outdated. And although I disagree, I can see where people are coming from. However, that is absolutely not the case with Halo 3's soundtrack whatsoever. I see absolutely zero reason to remake or re-record or redo anything about Halo 3's soundtrack. The only modifications that I'd be down for are, say, if they do add some cut levels, they create new soundtrack pieces that are designed in line with the original soundtrack to be built specifically for those cut levels over just reusing existing pieces of the soundtrack for them. In my eyes, that's perfectly fine, but I really don't want them to go doing a remake of the soundtrack like they did for Halo 1 and Halo 2 Anniversary. I really just don't think it's necessary. And thirdly, the sound effects. Now, I touched on this in pretty great detail in my last Halo 1 remake video, but people don't quite realize how well Bungie reusing the same sound effects for most of their weapons and vehicles, etc., throughout all of their games created a solidified identity for the vehicles and the weapons. For example, the plasma rifle almost always sounds the same. The sniper rifle almost always sounds the same. The shotgun. The Magnum. The Needler. The plasma pistol. The Ghost. The Banshee. The Warthog. The Energy Sword. Etc, etc. All of their sound profiles are almost identical throughout all of Bungie's games. One of my biggest fears with these 343 remakes, again, if they are real, is that their sound design philosophy comes in and overwrites Bungie's. 343's sound design philosophy not only entirely invalidates Bungie's sounds and also their philosophy for creating memorable sound profiles, but it also literally changes with every single game. Almost no gun or vehicle or anything sounds the same between 343 games. They change them every game, and so they never create their own memorable, consistent sound profiles. For these remakes, again, if they are real, please go back to using the Bungie-era sound effects for all applicable weapons, and also revive their sound profile that they created for almost every element of the sandbox. Halo's weapons and vehicles and such need their original audio identities back. They were solidified over upwards of 5 games, and the remakes could be the perfect place to finally reintroduce them. Okay, when it comes to talking about these remakes, we've spent a very long time talking about the campaign elements, and we've not actually spoken at all about the multiplayer components yet, and frankly, I think it would be borderline illegal for me to make a video about Halo 3 Anniversary and not mention Halo 3's multiplayer, right? So, hot take incoming. I do not think they should remake Halo 3's multiplayer. So, just hear me out, right? It is absolutely perfect as it is right now. The only major problem it had way back in the day was the hit registration, which granted in original Halo 3 wasn't great, but at least for me, on MCC's dedicated servers, that problem is almost entirely fixed. Very rarely do I ever have any hit detection problems. The only way that I'd be happy with a Halo 3 multiplayer remake would be if they remade it one-to-one with its original version in every single way, just with updated graphics. But to be honest, even then, I really don't think Halo 3 even needs updated graphics. You guys know that in my heart I'm a Halo 2 guy, but honestly, Halo 3's multiplayer is just perfect. It is the perfect Halo multiplayer, and I feel like even still today, 17 years after its release, that's still like a widely agreed upon opinion. It is the perfect casual and social multiplayer. It's an incredible competitive multiplayer. It's the perfect party game multiplayer. It really covers every base in almost perfect form. The only things they could really improve on are Forge, and also maybe a little bit of the sandbox, like, I don't know, buff the odd weapon here and there, like the Spiker, for example. But besides those two things, one of which is very, very niche, Halo 3 is the perfect Halo multiplayer that has never and likely will never be topped. It needs no major changes. Honestly, I'd much rather the remake just be a campaign remake and not multiplayer. The margin for error with remaking the multiplayer is significantly larger than the campaign, and truthfully, I do not have faith in any modern developer to remake Halo 3's multiplayer accurately without changing something for the sake of it, or breaking something, or just overall remaking it unfaithfully. I just don't think it'd happen nowadays. I just strongly doubt that a remake of Halo 3's multiplayer would be able to recapture that soul that Halo 3's multiplayer had, because something, either intentionally or unintentionally, would end up getting changed or modified in the remaking process, right? Like, they'd change the physics system, or the projectile system and shot leading would be toned down, or they'd add some silly modern mechanic or something like that. Overall, my thoughts on remaking Halo 3's multiplayer are don't. Just don't. Overall, Halo 3 was the perfect video game package that you just don't see nowadays. Quite frankly, the gaming industry has regressed so much since Bungie released it, and truth be told, I don't trust the modern gaming industry to produce a truly faithful Halo 3 Anniversary full package game. And honestly, I think out of all of the original trilogy, Halo 3 needs a remake/remaster anniversary the least. I can and do still play Halo 3 all the time. I mean, of my modern Halo playtime, 90% of it is Halo 3. It is still, without a shadow of a doubt, the most satisfying, fun Halo game to play by a country mile, quite honestly. And I think any attempt to modernize it would just destroy that feel. If a Halo 3 remake ends up happening, I really think it should only be a campaign remake. Just update the graphics whilst retaining the exact same aesthetic, add some cut levels, maybe, I'm still not quite sure about that one, and leave the rest of the campaign almost exactly the same. This game is just too perfect to be screwed up with a for modern audiences remake. So, what are your thoughts on Halo 3 Anniversary? Do you think we even need it? If you think that we do you think it should be a full package game, an attempt at a full package game, or just a campaign? Let me know down below in the comments. Quick reminder to pick up a badass unique new watch or piece of jewelry from Holtzgern by heading to my link in the description, or also the pinned comment, and make sure to use code HiddenXP to get 10% off your purchase store-wide. So, with that said, let's round this video out there. I want to give a huge thank you to Goblin for becoming a new iconic one over on Patreon. My dude, thank you very, very much. I greatly appreciate that. Legend. And also, of course, everyone else who continues to support me over there as well. Thank you all so much, and thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Leave your thoughts on Halo 3 Anniversary down in the comments, and I'll catch you all in the next one.